It all started during the summer, one of those restless, fun, free-flowing seasons where you meet new people at bars and forget half their names the next morning. That's how I met Matt. It was a bar crawl in Wrigleyville, and I was with a big group of friends. We were half watching the Cubs game, half sipping our drinks, enjoying the summer buzz. Matt and I ended up at the same corner of the bar, joking about baseball and the overpriced beer. He was charming, friendly, easy to talk to, not the type to dominate the conversation, but just present enough to make you feel like he was actually listening. Eventually, we exchanged Instagrams. He had a decent following, and the kind of photos you'd expect. Group shots with friends, beers on rooftops, city skylines at sunset. He looked like a guy who liked to have a good time but wasn't obnoxious about it. His life looked full, normal, fun. After that night, I didn't think much of it. Bar conversations don't usually lead to anything. And honestly, half the time, we all forget who we met once the hangover kicks in. But a few days later, Matt DM'd me. It wasn't creepy, just casual. He asked if I wanted to join him on a short weekend trip to Chicago. He'd booked an Airbnb and said his friends had bailed, but he didn't want to cancel the plans. I hesitated at first. Who goes on a trip with a guy they barely know? But something about him seemed trustworthy. And honestly, I needed a break. Work had been stressful, my friends were busy, and I hadn't gotten out of the city in months. So, I said yes. I asked a couple of my friends if they knew Matt well, but no one had much to say. Just vague, I've seen him around, or he's friends with so-and-so. That should have been my first clue. He was everywhere, but no one really knew him. We agreed to head out on August 15th and return on the 18th. Matt picked me up in a rental car, and the first part of the drive was surprisingly relaxed. Music, snacks, road trip vibes. We even stopped at a diner halfway through for some greasy food. He was talkative, polite, even a bit funny. But there was one thing that stood out. He drank. A lot. At first, I brushed it off. It's a vacation, right? A road beer or two wasn't that strange. But he kept cracking open more drinks as we got closer to the city. He offered me one, but I declined. He laughed it off, saying he liked to keep the mood right. That phrase stuck with me. When we arrived at the Airbnb, something shifted. It was a decent place, modern, clean, not too far from downtown. But the second we got in, Matt seemed jittery. He paced the living room, checked the locks on all the windows, then suddenly plopped down on the couch and stared at nothing. I thought maybe he was tired or buzzed, but it was like something had switched off inside him. Later that night, we hit up a couple bars. Chicago nightlife was alive, and I figured he'd snap out of his funk. He didn't. Matt drank more. A lot more. To the point where I had to step in and stop him from getting into a shouting match with another group. He was loud, aggressive, and slurring. Not the guy I'd met at that friendly bar in Wrigleyville. We stumbled back to the Airbnb around 2 a.m. I thought he might pass out immediately, but instead he sat in the kitchen in the dark. No lights. Just sat there, hunched over, breathing deeply. I didn't know what to say. I just went to bed. The next morning, I woke up around 9. The apartment was quiet, eerily quiet. I walked out to the living room and found Matt sitting on the couch, staring blankly at the wall. Stone sober. His beer from last night was still on the table. "Hey, you good?" I asked. He turned slowly, like I'd just snapped him out of a trance. "Yeah," he said. "Probably for the best if you leave today." The words hit me like cold water. "Wait, what?" He didn't explain, just stood up and went to the bedroom. I didn't ask questions. I grabbed my stuff, called a ride, and left. The silence in that Airbnb was suffocating. It wasn't just awkward, it was wrong. Like the walls had absorbed something that didn't want me there anymore. On the way home, I couldn't stop thinking about that moment, when he looked at me that morning. His eyes weren't tired or hungover. They were empty, like something inside him had left. I tried messaging him the next day. Nothing. A week later, I noticed his Instagram had been deleted. Gone. I asked around again, this time more seriously. A few people finally spoke up. "Yeah, I knew a Matt, but he dropped off years ago." "That guy? Haven't seen him in forever." "You sure he's not just using an old name?" It felt like I'd gone on a trip with a ghost. To this day, I don't know who Matt really was. and I never will. It was the kind of summer that felt like it could last forever. I had just wrapped up my first year of college. My name's Carlin, and I live in Maryland. School had been a grind. Non-stop lectures, part-time work, exams that seemed designed to destroy souls. So when summer break finally hit, I craved something quiet. Familiar. That's when I reached out to Jason and Marcus, my two closest friends since middle school. We drifted a little after heading off to different colleges, but when you've known someone since you were 12, time doesn't change much. We decided to rent a cheap beach house on the coast for a few days. Nothing fancy. Just something far enough to feel like a getaway, but close enough to be spontaneous. No plans, no pressure. Just the three of us. The beach town we picked was sleepy, a little weathered, and not the kind of place that makes it into Instagram travel reels. But that's what made it perfect. Old arcades, greasy boardwalk food, a view of the ocean that stretched forever. We arrived on a Friday afternoon, dropped our bags, and immediately hit the boardwalk like we were teenagers again. The first night, we just wandered. We played air hockey in a dim arcade, ate overpriced funnel cakes, and talked trash about who could swim the farthest the next day. Families with strollers passed us, seagulls screeched overhead, and the air smelled like salt and charcoal grills. It felt like home. Familiar. Safe. After grabbing burgers and a few drinks at a dive bar near the boardwalk, we returned to the house, cracked open some beers, and kicked off a late-night drinking game. By midnight, we were loud, buzzed, and laughing about absolutely nothing. And that's when Marcus said it. Let's go to the beach. It was such a simple idea, and yet somehow it felt exciting. Like we were doing something slightly rebellious. The beach after dark. No lifeguards, no rules. Just us, the moonlight, and the sound of the waves. We didn't bring much. Just our phones, the clothes on our backs, and a tiny flashlight Jason pulled out of a kitchen drawer. We weren't planning on swimming. We just wanted to be there. The beach was completely deserted. The boardwalk lights didn't reach this far. The sand was soft and damp, and the only sound was the gentle crash of the waves rolling in and out like breathing. At first, we stuck close to the entrance, but eventually we drifted, walking deeper along the shore, laughing and daring each other to run into the icy water. Jason waved the flashlight around in circles, lighting up chunks of beach ahead of us. The beam would occasionally catch bits of driftwood or distant footprints, but mostly it was just darkness and water. We eventually stopped near an abandoned lifeguard tower and sat in the sand. It was quiet, peaceful even. That's when Jason whispered, "Do you guys hear that?" We went still. At first nothing. Just the waves. But then, yes, a soft crunch. Footsteps. Not fast. Slow. Steady. Rhythmic. Coming from behind us. From the dunes and trees. Jason stood up and swept the flashlight around. Nothing. Marcus laughed nervously. Probably a deer or something. But I wasn't convinced. The footsteps didn't sound like an animal. They were too deliberate, like someone walking barefoot on sand with purpose. We all got quiet, real quiet. Eventually, the sounds stopped. We joked to break the tension. Jason turned off the flashlight to conserve the battery. We lay back and stared at the stars. 5 minutes passed. 10. Then, a crunch. We all sat up at the same time. The sound wasn't coming from behind us now. It was in front of us. Jason clicked the flashlight back on and aimed it toward the water line. There was nothing. Then, he moved the beam slightly left. And we saw it. A shape. A figure. Not close. Maybe 50 feet down the shore. Just standing there. No light. No movement. It wasn't looking at us. Or if it was, we couldn't tell. It was too far. Too dark. We all froze. Marcus whispered, "What the hell is that?" The figure started moving. Not toward us. Not away from us. Pacing. Back and forth. Like a metronome. Like it was keeping time with the waves. 5 steps to the right. Pause. 5 steps to the left. Over and over. I felt my body tighten. Something about it was deeply wrong. Not threatening. Not aggressive. Just unnatural. Jason lowered the flashlight for a moment. Should we say something? No, I said immediately. I didn't even realize I had spoken out loud, but everything in me said, don't engage. Another minute passed. Then the figure stopped, dead still. Then, slowly, it turned and began walking directly toward us. Jason dropped the flashlight. We ran. No hesitation. We didn't scream. We didn't look back. We just sprinted up the beach, tripping over sand, legs burning, breath short. The silence behind us was terrifying. It was like the ocean had gone mute. When we reached the boardwalk lights, we turned. The beach was empty. No footsteps. No figure. Nothing but waves and moonlight. We got back to the house and locked every door and window. None of us talked much. We didn't even sleep. We just sat around the living room in silence until the sun came up. The next morning we tried to laugh it off. Maybe it was a prank. Maybe someone was messing with us. Maybe our minds filled in the gaps where our vision failed. But then Jason showed us something. He had opened the flashlight app on his phone that night, and apparently, while fumbling around in the dark, he accidentally tapped the camera. There was a photo on his phone. Blurry, tilted, dark. But in the middle of the frame, right under the lifeguard tower, was a shape. A figure. Closer than we remembered, and facing the camera. It was the kind of summer where everything felt like it was on pause. The weeks had blurred together. Days were hot, nights were restless, and I needed something to shake me out of the haze. That's when my cousin Lauren texted me. I didn't even hesitate. That cabin had been in Lauren's family for decades. A secluded, wooden home in the Adirondacks right on the water. No Wi-Fi, no cell service, just trees, the lake, and silence. We'd gone up there once as kids, and I remember loving the eerie quiet of it. I hadn't been back since. So I packed a bag and hit the road. It ended up being 5 of us on the trip. Me, Lauren, her boyfriend Zach, and 2 mutual friends, Maya and Chris. We all needed a break. No one brought laptops. We promised no talk of school, work, or deadlines. Just campfires, beers, and maybe a swim if the water wasn't too cold. The drive up was peaceful. The deeper we got into the forest, the quieter everything became. Civilization just peeled away. The cabin sat on a sloping hill that opened to a small lake, still and glassy, framed by pine trees on all sides. There was a dock, a fire pit, and a small shed out back with kayaks and paddles. For the first 2 days, everything was perfect. We swam during the day, roasted marshmallows at night, and told dumb stories by the fire. It felt like something out of a coming-of-age movie. No tension, no stress. But on the 3rd night, something shifted. We'd been sitting around the fire pit after dinner, just talking and laughing. The sky was moonless that night, pitch black. Only the glow of the fire lit our little clearing. At one point, Maya suddenly tilted her head. "Do you guys hear that?" We all paused. There was a soft crunching noise coming from the tree line. It wasn't wind. It wasn't an animal scurrying. It was slow, deliberate. Footsteps. Zach stood up and grabbed a flashlight. He aimed it at the woods, sweeping back and forth. Nothing. "It's probably a deer," he said. "Or a raccoon." But it didn't feel like an animal. The air had gone heavy, thick. The way it does before a thunderstorm, only this was dry and still. And silent, like the whole forest was holding its breath. We brushed it off eventually and went back inside. But that weight in the air stayed with me. I went to bed around midnight. The cabin had 2 bedrooms and a pull-out couch. I got the couch that night. I tossed and turned for hours. Sometime after 2 a.m., I finally gave up and got up to use the bathroom. The main bathroom was outside. The cabin had an outhouse, about 40 feet into the trees. A flashlight hung by the door, so I grabbed it and headed out. The air was cold. I could hear the dock creaking in the water even though there was no wind. My sandals crunched softly on the gravel as I walked toward the outhouse. When I got to the door, the flashlight flickered once. I muttered a nervous laugh. Classic horror movie timing, I whispered to myself. But then I heard it. Crunch, crunch, footsteps. Behind me. I spun around with the flashlight. Nothing. But the beam flickered again, and for a second I saw something. A figure. Tall, still, just standing between the trees. No face, no movement. Just there. My heart slammed into my ribs. I didn't wait. I sprinted back to the cabin, breath ragged, every inch of me screaming to move. I didn't even lock the door. I just slammed it and stood there shaking. Everyone else was asleep. I didn't wake them. I just sat on the couch and waited for the sun. The next morning, I told them what I saw. Lauren laughed at first, but Maya didn't. She stared at me, pale. Then she said, "Last night, I woke up too. I went to the kitchen for water, and I looked out the window." She paused. There was someone standing at the edge of the trees, just facing the cabin. We were both dead silent. Zach tried to play it off. "Look, this place has weird shadows. Old wood makes weird sounds. It was probably just nerves." But neither Maya nor I bought that. Later that afternoon, we went kayaking to shake it off. We stayed out on the lake for hours. When we came back to the dock around sunset, the forest was golden. It almost made me forget. But that night, it returned. We were all inside, playing cards, when Chris stood up suddenly and walked to the window. "Do you guys see that?" he asked. We followed him. In the distance, between two trees at the far end of the clearing, was a shape. It didn't move, didn't flinch, just stood, far enough that we couldn't see its face, close enough to know it was watching. Zach grabbed the flashlight and flung open the door. "Hey!" he shouted into the dark. Nothing. "Who's out there?" No reply. He took a few steps forward, but the shape was gone. Just gone. He came back in and locked the door. No one said anything for the rest of the night. None of us slept. The next morning, we packed everything and left, early. None of us discussed it on the drive back. None of us said goodbye when we dropped each other off. Lauren's family still owns that cabin. She invited me up again the next summer. I said no, and I always will, because some places feel too quiet for a reason. And sometimes something is watching from that quiet.